Hey guys, we are starting week 6, which is hard to believe, um, but we are continuing on with what we talked about last week. We talked about independent and dependent variables, and just to kind of go back and review just real quick, an independent variable is something that does not need another quantity to impact it. It can be by itself. And so in this case, this week, our independent variable is always going to be X. It is not impacted by another quantity. And so our independent variable is going to be X. Now, our dependent variable, which remember that is that's we're gonna call kind of our output. That's ultimately gonna be our answer. So our dependent variable is going to depend on another number, whatever that number is. So you'll see in a second when we start talking about equations and the tables and stuff that dependent is going to be our y value. And so you'll see that here in just a second. So we're going to go ahead and get started with this week's lesson, which is multiplicative and additive relationships. And we're just taking our independent and dependent variables a step further. And this week we are going to be adding graphs. You'll see here in just a second. So our first slide is just our vocabulary words. Our multiplicative relationships use multiplication and division. That's the biggest thing right there, is that they use multiplication and division to compare independent X and the dependent Y quantities of a relationship. And then our additive relationship involves only addition and subtraction. You see up here the word additive has the word add, and over here multiplicative has the word looks like multiply. And so the two operations that go together with that is multiplication and division, and the two operations that go with grouping or counting would be addition and subtraction. And that's to compare the independent X and dependent Y quantities of the relationship. So that's just the definitions of those two things. So looking here, starting with multiplicative relationships, we're going to be talking about the rule. And what you'll see is, by rule, I mean, how am I getting from X to Y? And remember, Y being your outcome. That is your answer. So to get from 1 to 3, or from 2 to 6, or from 4 to 12, the easiest way to do that is to take your Y values and divide them, or if you know what times 1 is 3 or what times 2 is 6. But if you don't know that, then the easiest thing to do would be to do 3 divided by 1, 6 divided by 2, 12 divided by 4, and that will give you your number. So 3 divided by 1 is 3. But I am going from X to Y. And to go from X to Y, I'm actually taking that X value and multiplying it by 3. So that's how I'm getting that. But in order to know what I'm multiplying X by, sometimes to get that answer, you have to divide so that it gives you this number right here that you are multiplying by. Because the opposite of multiplication is division. They interchange with each other. So if you don't know the answer to a division problem, you can always multiply, and vice versa. They just work interchangeably. So staying with this, 6 divided by 2 is also 3. So I know that to get from 2 to 6, I just multiplied by 3. So that's my rule. going from X and getting my answer over here as Y, I'm taking my X value and multiplying it by 3. So this is 4 times 3 is 12. So if this is the same rule here, X times 3, what would be my Y value when X is 7? So my Y value when X is 7 would be 21. Okay, now X and Y. That should look familiar because we've already done that already when we talked about coordinate planes. So remember your coordinate plane, when we talked about your coordinate plane, your ordered pair was inside the parentheses was X, comma, Y. Okay, those were your ordered pairs. You had your X value and you had your Y value. Let me make those bigger so you can see them. So this is how, over here, this is how this column is going to look right here. So I'm going to take my X value, which is 1, and then my Y value, which is 3. And that makes the ordered pair 1, 3. I'm going to take my X value here, which is 2, and my Y value is 6. I'm going to take my X value, which is 4, and my Y value, which is 12. So what do you think the ordered pair would be here for this last column, 7 and 21? How does that ordered pair look? So I'm going to take my X value and my Y value, and that is my ordered pair is 7, 21. Now, remember last week we created our equation from our table, and we're gonna do that same thing. So my equation is going to always start with Y equals. That's how my equation starts, because this is my dependent. And so this number is always going to change depending on what my X value is. So all I'm gonna do is take my rule that I had here, which was times 3. So that's X times 3, which remember we always put our number first. It's our coefficient and then our variable. So your Y answers you're going to get by multiplying any X number times 3. Now we're going to go over here and look at a graph. Okay, so it's not exactly the same coordinate plane that we worked with whenever we did your plotting the points, but remember my x-axis is always going to be running left to right. So here is this is my x, and then your y-axis is always running up and down. So this is my y-axis. Now, I'm going to come back over here and just kind of look at this real quick. So here's my table. I'm going to take these ordered pairs and I'm going to graph them on this graph. So we'll go by ones here. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then I'm going to go by threes up here. So this is 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21. So there's 21. And this is 18, 15, 12, 9, 6, 3. And then this is 0, 0. That's 0 right there. And then these are all ones. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. So my first ordered pair was 1, 3. So I'm going to start at 0, 0. I'm going to go over to the right 1 and then up 3 and put my point. So that's 1, 3. My next one was 2, 6. So I'm going to go over 2 and then up to 6. My next one was 4, 12. So I'm going to go over to 4 and then up to 12. And then my last one was 7, 21. So I'm going to go over to the right 7 and up to 21. And then as good as I can, I'm going to draw a line. Okay. And the equation for that line is y equals 3 times x. Okay. All right. So that's multiplicative relationships. All right, moving on to additive relationships. So this is going to be when I look at this table and when I'm trying to figure out my rule, I can look and say, okay, well, 20 divided by 0 is just going to be 0, which I'm going to get something different every time. 40 divided by 20, that's going to be 2. So already I have different answers here. So I'm looking for a different rule here. How am I getting from 0 or from x to y? Well, in this case, my rule here, every time you see I'm adding, you're adding 20. So 0 plus 20 is 20. So my ordered pair here is going to be 0, 20. That's my x value. And my x value, when it's 0, y is 20. So how do I get from 20 to 40? Well, if I did 40 minus 20, my answer would be 20. So to get from x to y, again, I'm adding 20. And then here, to figure out if this is all staying the same, I would do 45 minus 25, which would also give me 20. So again, to go from x to get my answer y, I'm adding 20 here. Oh, I forgot to do my ordered pair. So up here, this one would be when x is 20, y is 40. And then here, when x is 25, my y is 45. Okay, so if my rule stays the same, if this is x plus 20, then what would be my y value here when x is 40? Okay, it would be 40 plus 20 is 60. So when x is 40, y is 60. So I'm going to come over here to my equation, which is going to look a little different this time. But again, I always start with y equals. And then I'm going to take my rule, which is x plus, and then my rule is 20. So it's x plus 20. So that's my rule. So there's my rule. X or y equals x plus 20. So I can plug in any number here for x and figure out what my y value would be. Okay, so now we're going to come over and we are going to look at the graph whenever we are doing an additive relationship. So I'll just go ahead. This one was the multiplicative. So let's multiply. So, and then this one is going to be our additive. So our additive, again, x-axis runs left to right. So here is my x and here is my y. And because these numbers kind of go up in a different way, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go up by tens. So this is 10, 20, 30, 40, we'll just go 50. Okay, this again is 0. And then going up the y-axis, we're going to still keep it 10s, 20, 30, 40, 50, and then 60. Okay, so looking at our first table, our first ordered pair is 0, 20. Okay, so when x is 0, y is 20. So that x being 0 means I don't go left or right. I'm just going to go up or down. I'm actually going to change the color to this one. Okay, so this is 20. That's 0, 20. The next one is 20, 40. So I'm going to go to the right to 20 and then up to 40. And then I had 25, 45. Now, that's going to be in between 20 and 30. So I'm going to say here's 25 right there. So I'm going to go over to 20 and then about halfway between 40 and 50. And then I have 40, 60. So I'm going to go over to 40 and up to 60. And I'm going to do my best to draw a line here. And this, remember, the equation is we get our y values over here by doing x plus 20. So I'm taking my x values down here, that are down here, and I'm adding 20 to them to get my y values over here. And again, this is what we call an additive relationship. Okay, so that's really it. It's just a matter of knowing, figuring out, being able to figure out your rules, to be able to fill in this graph and then to make your equation. Okay, if y'all have questions, please ask. And I want to be able to help y'all. I hate that I can't see y'all face to face, for y'all to be able to ask questions while I'm doing this. I miss you guys a ton. So I hope y'all have a great week in the rest of your classes. Just remember, you're doing a great job, and you're doing the best that you absolutely can under these circumstances. I'm so proud of y'all for always getting your work done, whether it be the day it's assigned or a couple days later. Guys, as long as you get it done, that's all we're asking. And I'm so proud of y'all because 100% of y'all are getting your work done. The other thing is make sure you're going back and there's a couple of assignments that maybe you could redo for a better grade, or maybe it was right when things began and you weren't sure what was going on and now you do. You need to go back and redo some of those assignments that you see zeros for in Power School. I want to be able to help y'all, so if you have questions about those, please reach out to me. You can email me, you can send me a message in Google Classroom, whatever's easiest for you. I'm just here to make life a little bit easier and just to help. So hope you guys are doing well. And I guess we'll do this again next week.